I forgot.
That's okay.
Yeah, so
The students, you might get a notice stating that it's being recorded. If you can just approve, or I'm not.
okay, let me see. Are you
It's recording now.
it's recording?
Yes.
Great.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay, so all right, so biotech, pharma, and then you have medical devices, right? There's a whole other class of products, and they are, some of the companies are Abbott, is Edwards Life Sciences, which is actually not far from, their company is not very far from where KGI is. Medtronic, diagnostics, there's Danaher, Abbott, Thermo Fisher. Other tools, Thermo Fisher, if you have worked in a lab, you're most definitely seen Thermo Fisher devices, Illumina devices, and BioRad devices, right? These are all tools that we often use to do research. Okay, so this is just a rough, it gives you a rough overall idea of what the industry is and what kinds of firms populate those industries. So we'll hear terms like small molecule, large molecule, biologics, and all of that, right? So what is a small molecule pharmaceutical? Small molecule is basically chemical, products produced through chemical processes. These are basically small molecules, right? When you compare different molecular sizes, these are really small molecules. Many of the former blockbusters, are small molecules like Tylenol and the kinds of drugs that you see over the counter. Most of those drugs are small molecule pharmaceuticals. All right, top 10 pharmaceutical companies by sales is a little outdated, but you could say it's roughly the same. There's Roche, there's Novartis, there's Pfizer, Merck, Bristol Myers, Johnson & Johnson, the list goes on, right? So these are pharmaceutical companies by sales. Okay, so I want everybody to be familiar with the names, etc. here. All right, so then you have large molecule pharmaceuticals, right? So these are produced in bioreactors. These are, obviously larger molecules, microbial cells, mammalian cells. These are produced in living systems sometimes. Basically larger, more complex biological types of products that are used to treat different disease conditions. Okay, and just remember that these, the regulatory aspects could be more complex because the molecules are also complex, right? So you don't necessarily know what would how it would affect our body, even though these large molecules may mimic some of our own compounds or hormones, for example. It's still you still need to go through your typical regulatory processes and all of that. Genentech is one such company, formed in 1976, South San Francisco, pioneered recombinant DNA technology, key markets, insulin, oncology, all of that. Okay. Amgen, another firm, biotech firm, Ventura County, as I said, is a big recruiter of ours from KGI. Gilead, began with small molecule therapies. They are leader in antiviral drugs. For example, COVID, you guys remember last year, remdesivir was much talked about as a possible treatment for COVID. So that's produced there at Gilead. It's the second largest biotech by market value. Gilead is such a growing company, and something that you may want to consider when you consider future career choices. All right, so then you have medical devices and diagnostics. There's in vitro diagnosis. So for example, they could also in vitro diagnostics, but also cardiovascular kinds of things like pacemakers, valves. That is in vivo, right? It's or in situ, if you want to call it that, but in vivo, right? Like artificial heart stents, grafts, Edward Life Sciences, that, as I mentioned, the company that I mentioned earlier, they're in Southern California area. They specialize in this. That's the next slide. Edwards Life Sciences, and they're the leader in heart valves. They're also, there's something very interesting about these kinds of companies that involve things like heart, cardiac valves and stents and all those things, is that you also need to help physicians and or rather educate or work with physicians and other medical professionals to not just market the product, but also to use the product, right? And that's what they do really well, is that they work with physicians, and the company has a lot of other positive aspects. But then you have Illumina, which is a leader in DNA sequencing. I think it's in San Diego, San Diego's largest life science firm, very well known for its scientific rigor and scientific culture, right? They're very well known for their innovation, but also how closely they follow the science, and how their culture is very science oriented in nature. So, okay, so. Also, I want you to be familiar with California's role in biotechnology. Overall, California is home to about 60% of the country's biotech industry. If you look at the biotech, this industry as a whole, San Francisco is probably the birthplace of biotech. Third in venture capital, fourth in patents, fifth in jobs. So there are a lot of top five, if you will, in different aspects of the entrepreneurial milieu. LA, Orange County area is smaller, but it continues to grow. As I said, Amgen is a huge recruiter. Gilead is also there. Those kinds of companies are pretty good in terms of recruitment and all of that. So again, remember that California biotech companies have changed their lives. Like I said, Edwards, very famous in their cardiac, products that help, valves and all of that. So that has a huge impact on the population. So if you look at other life science industries, there's 3,040 life science companies. Direct employment jobs, about 200,000, 300,000, close to 300,000. There's a 7% job growth rate. Remember, many of the life science companies are entrepreneurial companies, so they're not necessarily the large companies like Gilead or Amgen, companies like that. Average wage would be 116K. That obviously varies with different in different years. So note that this is a 2017 report. So obviously the numbers might have changed a lot. So before we go into job functions and roles, I've been talking a lot here, right? So I wanted to ask you all, why were you interested in pursuing jobs and careers in life sciences? I would like to hear your reasons. Obviously, I have read many of your letter of intents and all of that, so I know a little bit, but I would love to hear from you.
Oh, I can go.
Yes, Sophia.
So like I mentioned before, I graduated with a biology degree, but I'd always known that I wanted to, I guess, be connected to the sciences one way or another. And so I've tried research positions, I've tried working or volunteering at hospitals, and going through all of that, I realized that's not really the spectrum of jobs that I wanted, to pursue in the future. And so even after, thinking about all of the other extracurriculars that I've done in school, like doing ambassador stuff, working teams, etc., I've kind of, I guess, felt more drawn to the business side. And so that's why I kind of connected the two somehow by pursuing an MBS degree.
Okay. So you think what you're saying is through pursuing an MBS degree, you can sort of accomplish your sort of purpose, right? So what is the purpose overall, or goal or mission you have in terms of following the career in life science industry? Anyone else? Sophia, thank you for your answer. Appreciate that. Anyone else?
I can go.
Yes.
Well, I was very intrigued by the field itself. Right from my high school, I was very interested in studying about different diseases and its cure. So by the time I passed my class 12, I think I had made an entire booklet of different diseases. So this is how obsessed I was, especially for like the rare genetic diseases. But then with time, I realized that my personality does not really match with the fact that you have to sit inside a room for like the lab the whole day, like in front of the books. I think I personally belong to the family of business as well. So both my parents are business people. So I think that that is my major reason of switching, not exactly switching, but just inclining towards the management and the business side of bio more, because I relate through the biological field, but also my personality completely matches that area. So I think that is one reason I did that.
Great, good answer, and good. Thanks for clarifying or explaining where you come from, right? So and so the main thing, what I was trying to say also, through the slides as well, is that you have all these industry, these companies. You can contribute in different ways, right? You don't necessarily always have to be, a lab-based or research-based contributor. You could also contribute through other ways, looking at the business side of things, as well as even things like, after you sell a product, you often work with the customer to make sure that they're satisfied and they know they're using your product. Let's say a diagnostic or a medical device that you just sold, right? That'll help make basically the lives of patients much better, right? If you're coming from a company standpoint. So that's also the message, is that whatever your purpose is, in terms of accomplishing things within the life science industry, you can always choose a path, right? The final goal may be similar for most of you, but the way to get there might be different for all of you. Some of you might want to go into more on the marketing side, whereas others may want to maybe look at more of the strategy side, which I'll come to some of the job options that can lead you there. Or some of you might be more inclined, let's say you really love numbers and Excel sheets and all the quantitative stuff, then we have something for you, right? There's a different career for you to follow there. Okay, any other thoughts on your goals and specific preferences for certain careers? I'm keeping an eye on time too.
Okay, maybe I can go.
Okay.
In my case, I wanted to try to transform this scientific knowledge into products and services. So I really wanted to contribute from this part because, for example, here in Peru, when the COVID pandemic started, a lot of places offer the service of testing, the antigen testing or the molecular testing, and they don't tell the patients or the clients for what reason they could take the test. So I was really, it made me feel really sad, and also I was kind of angry because I think this is also important. So I decided that I really wanted to go through maybe this part and make the client know what it's consuming. So yeah, that's why I decided to switch.
Good point. And sometimes, as we're guilty of this as researchers too sometimes, right? We think that everybody can understand, or I mean, we spend like, let's say 15, 20 years on a topic, very narrow topic, right? So we know all the acronyms, we know what is going on. And so when we speak, sometimes we don't realize that another person, they might be, very good at a different field, but when we talk, we have to make sure that they understand why certain things are done. Even the difference between antigen testing and the word escapes me. What is the other testing? PCR, right?
Molecular.
Yeah, molecular testing. The differences and how different things can depending on the type, when you got the infection versus when you should test. These things can be valuable for patients. By the way, I had we went through COVID a few weeks back, and one of our doctors in the family actually explained to us why you should wait a few days to take the test, in a particular kind of test, so that's when the virus sort of comes out, right? That's when you can actually detect the virus. So we actually got negative tests initially. So certain things like that. Even, I mean, I consider myself a little bit more well-versed than the average person on pharmaceuticals, but still, even then I forgot about the fact about like incubation periods and how that these things can affect. So one thing I would suggest, and this is a little bit not off the sequence a little bit, but I would say if you're going to marketing or sales, always be a teacher, right? Always try to be a teacher. And if you have that kind of a skill and a passion to be a teacher and more of an instructional mindset rather than just saying, okay, you should do this, right? Don't ask questions, just do this, right? If you're more of a teacher who explains things, believe me, you will have a lot of opportunities, not just in training, but also in post-sales interactions with customers, other marketing areas where you have, I can think of like several alumni in my mind right now who does that as part of their job, where they actually clearly explain things, make that into marketing campaigns or even just, informational campaigns for customers to understand their products. So I know I took a little bit of a detour here, but any other thoughts on careers or why you want to pursue this as a larger purpose? Anyone else? Okay, so maybe in the interest of time, I'll leave time for questions also, guys. So you can always ask me questions after we get through this. So job functions and roles, like I said, in my many of the students, I know some of you didn't attend the morning session as part of the CBB1 program. As I mentioned, job functions and roles can be very different, right? So each role can be very different. And one of the things we often talk about before I go into the specifics, one of the things we talk about is, if you want to make a note of this, it's called PJ fit. PJ is not poor joke, right? We use the term PJ for poor jokes. PJ fit means person job fit, right? Person job fit, right? So how well you fit with a particular job function or a role. Earlier, we were talking about personalities and things like that. So we may have certain kinds of skill sets, certain kinds of personalities that we default to. Remember, personality is, people have different definitions of personality. Your personality is your default tendencies, right? Your average. If you're given a situation, what would you default to? Would you default to being nervous, or would you default to being like a meditative guy, very calm, right? Or are you very, very nervous, right? So again, remember, this is default. And there is questions about whether you can, non-default it rather, or learn out of it, right? Personally, I would say it's very difficult to default out of it. So if you're an introverted person, you're more than likely to be introverted. Now you can regulate, you can strain yourself and act like you're extroverted, right? But that'll take a lot of energy from you, right? Some of you might have noticed that when you're going to a conference or something, if you're by default an introverted person, you have to sort of act extroverted. You have to network with people, right? You have to say hi to people. And for introverts, that'll take a lot of energy. So about 30% of the population apparently is highly introverted, me included, right? So it'll take some effort to come out of the personality trait, right? So keep those things in mind. None of these things are final, right? So don't think of any of these things as a deal breaker when you look at all these job functions and roles. I really want to drive this point home, even though I said personality is default, our skills are by default certain tendencies. Don't think that, okay, I'm not extroverted, so I'm not going to be good at sales. That's not true, because you can do other things that can actually make you a better salesperson than you thought as an introverted person, right? So for example, there are certain extroverted people that could be too pushy, right? They're in your face, and so an introverted salesperson could be a welcome change, right? Sometimes. So I'm not saying that all extroverted persons are like that. Please don't take it that way. Just that your personality and your skills can always be compensated for using other skills, and being authentic and being yourself can actually help you in the long run. But again, remember, be practical. Certain jobs may not be a good fit for you, right? So don't think that any job can be taken over. I can just be good at it. There may be certain jobs that are not good for you, or your values may not align well with certain jobs, right? So just to give you a quick example, I know we are we are veering off a little bit, but before I mention this job functions and roles, I had one of my classmates in my MBA program. He actually took up a job that it's a product that he would never use. In fact, he had a strong value against that product, right? So I asked him, how did you accept this job offer? He said, it's my first job, right? So I had to, even though it's the product itself is something that I will never use, it's a job that you are not directly working directly with the product, right? So that can happen to you too, in terms of, when you're looking at multiple companies for jobs and roles and everything. All right, so that's just my pet peeve here about personalities and job fit and all of that. All right, so some job functions that you may want to think about. So marketing is all about customers, right? So remember, marketing is a global sort of term. So don't equate sales and marketing, right? Sales is one part of marketing, right? So marketing is a larger, broader category, and sales would be one part of marketing. In some cases, they actually have a separate sales team with marketing. So in some cases, sales is separate, although, I would argue sales is part of marketing, right? So remember, again, identifying and meeting customer needs. It'll also involve post-sales working with customers, right? Post-sales interactions with customers, which is a big thing in devices and diagnostics. So for those students who are already, keeping an eye on the devices and diagnostics and saying, okay, that's what I want to do. I have a background in devices and diagnostics. You may want to think about post-sales marketing types of careers, which will involve working with customers after you sell the product. All right, so business development, identifying and closing IP licensing deals, also generating new business, right? So remember, business development can be a very nebulous term. It is different in different companies. So I'm just warning you that some companies use business development as a slightly different, function than other companies. Generally, what it means that, as the term indicates, you're developing business, right? You're developing new leads, you're developing new IP licensing situations, or identifying new opportunities, and you work with a lot of company strategy too, right? So should we spend resources on A versus B versus C, right? What is the proportion? So we have these three ideas. Should we take one and drop the other two, right? Then after 10 years, you might regret, oh, I should have gone with idea C, right? I chose A, now C is like a big hit, right? Ask the scientists who developed quartz movement, or the people who developed user interfaces at, I think, Kodak, I believe, which is the user interface that Microsoft and Apple use now, right? So they thought that was not very interesting, right? Anyway, so there are certain situations where organizations might say, okay, we are going to go with idea A and we're going to drop B and C because we don't have resources to spend on that. That would be business development, working closely with strategy. Okay, finance, obviously everybody knows that it's the money game, right? Money is everything, right? It's a bottom line. So again, finance and business development, they work closely together. You see how cross-functional this can get, right? Business development is very cross-functional, and finance is a major aspect of it, because finance folks actually basically deal with the money, right? Operations, I would say operations is the day-to-day, function of an organization, right? So, okay, you could have a great product, right, which diagnoses a disease condition, but you need someone to manufacture that thing, right? That whole contraption that you see in pictures with the screen and the buttons and everything. They even want to know where to place the buttons, right? So we talked to, as part of a project with a company, obviously I cannot say the name of the company. One of the operations managers, vice presidents, was talking about how the scientists wanted a bigger button on the device, right? And they said, yeah, just move the button, right? And they thought it was an easy fix, but the manufacturing person came running into the room and said, guys, you cannot just move the button just like that, right? You need to recalibrate it. You need to move different things. So operations is not just manufacturing certain things, but also working closely with scientists and patients and all those people to make sure that you manufacture and smoothly run the business, basically. All right. So operations, again, like marketing, is a global term. Within operations, you can have things like manufacturing, supply chain, right? Even looking at a prediction of demand and supply and all of those things, right? Which will border. Now you're overlapping with marketing now, right? So that is why marketing and supply chain, marketing and operations work very closely together, right? Because if you're an operations person, you're dealing with manufacturing, let's say 1,000 units per day. But the marketing people need to tell you, hey, you don't need 1,000 units. We only need 500 for this month, right? So then you manufacture 500 per month. Sometimes marketing people come and say, we need 2,000 per month. All of a sudden you have to say, as a marketing, as an operations person, sorry, our factory capacity is only 1,000. We can maybe take it to 1,500. Then you need to deal with your customers. And all of those things are interrelated, right? And that is what operations folks do. So if you're inclined towards numbers, Excel sheets, and very organized, you're a very organized person, you like numbers a lot, I would strongly suggest that you consider a career in operations. It is a huge area of interest and opportunity. So for those people who are very good at it naturally and would like to learn, passionate about it, I would strongly consider operations. All right, regulatory, speaking about organized, right? So many of you got a good glimpse of what regulatory could be from Dr. Larry Davis in the CBB1 session. Basically, regulatory means you have to work with the FDA to get things approved, right? So that's a long process, right? There are several stages in it. And for those people who are in the CBB1 program, I know that you'll have several sessions from Dr. Larry Davis that will give you, again, a very brief overview of how regulatory affairs work. Very hot area, very strong area of opportunity for people, again, who are very organized, detail-oriented, deadline-oriented people who would love to go through all of the regulations that the FDA website has, right? If you enjoy that kind of thing, regulatory will be a good area for you. Okay. All right. So at this point, let me pause to see if there are any questions at this point. I went through different careers and just an overview of the different careers and duties and all of that. Any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to ask, are there any careers that are like higher paying in comparison to the others? Oh,
let me see if I can pull that information for you. Average pay, but it's a little complicated because you might have. So one of the things that I would encourage, so just to back up a little bit, one of the things I encourage everyone to do, this is part of my OB class that I do, is that I would like you to, so when you're at a stage where sort of which career you want to pursue, I want you to look at top managers, or when you speak to speakers that come to KGI, right? You'll be attending speaker sessions, ask them about their background and what they did their degree in. And so that you can get an idea of how people get promoted to certain certain levels in the organization and what kind of backgrounds they have, right? So for example, if you take a look at a particular set of companies in an industry and all of the CEOs have a finance background, right? Or all of the CEOs have an MD, right? So what does that mean for you, right? Means that, obviously, if you want to be a CEO, you need to have that kind of background. So you can sort of gauge, get an idea of where you can be in terms of the hierarchy. The reason why I point that out, Karina, is because your level, determines your pay too, right? Not just your discipline itself, but definitely let me see if I can pull that information for you. Another thing I would suggest is, let me quickly get that for you here and for everyone. This is again part of my OB class, but if you just want to just quickly look at it, this site, I'm going to put it in chat here. It's called OStarNet. And this is a free, .org, right? It's a free web resource that some of my most admired people that I admire a lot, who are like the gods of HR, human resource management, which is very closely related to my area of teaching. Some of those people compile this information, taking multiple years, multiple studies. So when you go to this website, you can just type in the role you want or the role you're interested in, and it'll bring up a lot of the skills and things that you're that is necessary. I don't know whether it will list the pay, but I can search to see if I can find this for you, Karina. But definitely basically it's the demand supply relationship, Karina. So for example, regulatory, there's a lot of demand for regulatory now. There's a lot of demand for operations. So obviously your pay will be higher for certain kinds of jobs like that. Depends on your experience too. There's a lot of room for negotiation. So, okay, any other questions? Okay, so let me go back to the slides. All right, so marketing, project management, operations, supply chain, finance, consulting. So I want you to keep in mind that consulting is always an option, right? So consulting means let's say an organization comes up, they got approved for a particular drug and they're wondering how to price it, right? They're also wondering how to launch it. How do we launch it? How do we price it? There's lots of questions like that. So what do? They go to a consulting firm, and you will hear as part of CBB and also summer program, actually you'll hear from Mr. Stephen Chang, who is one of our earliest alumni. He actually graduated from one of the first classes from KGI, very successful consulting. He's actually head of consulting operations at Syneos Health, which is one of the very big consulting firms. So, the companies, they go to this consulting firm and say, how should we price it? What should we do for pricing? How should we market it? So that is consulting. Excuse me. Then you have marketing roles. As I mentioned, marketing needs, market research. You conduct research on what do people like, what do people don't like about your product, right? So for example, if you have a product that is designed for, let's say, older age consumers, and let's say you have, a particular kind of product that is typically used by younger generation, not to stereotype here, but older people like me, for example, I need glasses. I need to see bigger numbers, right? So there may be certain information that you might want to get from the customers that might help you design your product in a better way. Creating demand, right? Just ask the late Steve Jobs. If you check out his YouTube videos and everything, he talks about how customer didn't even know that they needed an iPad, for example, right? The product category did not exist. So if you listen to his talks, you will find that he actually created demand, right? Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs, created demand for a product category that did not exist before. So that the same thing can happen in the life sciences industry as well. All right, so project management is another thing that you may want to keep in mind. As I mentioned in the previous class, I know it's overlap, guys, for CBB1 students, but what is going on here is that you have a project that is going on, right? So you have multiple people involved in a project. There could be researchers, operations, manufacturing people, there could be finance people, marketing people, all those different departments are involved. And a project manager coordinates tasks between different departments, right? So this is where you need both detail-oriented task-related skills, but also people-related skills, right? Because you're keeping on calling different people. Hey, have you completed this? Have you completed this? Like that. It's an entry-level position many times, but it is definitely going to give you a wealth of experience working with multiple different people. Okay, so it'll help coordinate project management, product launch and all of that, and that is definitely going to help you, get better at different aspects. And that I would say the same for consulting careers as well, which is coming up soon. Operations, I already mentioned. Manufacturing, right? Supply chain means that how do you the chain of events that happen when the product is conceived all the way up to product is manufactured and delivered to customers, right? So for you guys, most of you guys who are going to work in pharmaceuticals and even large molecule vaccines, for example, right? How do you transport vaccines? When Pfizer and what's the name of the other vaccine company? Sorry, guys, I'm drawing a blank. But their vaccines needed to be frozen, right? So you can imagine, as a supply chain professional, if you're working with a company that has a product that needs to be frozen all the way till the end user, you have a new set of challenges, right? As opposed to let's say another product like an electronic product or something. Okay, so that's something that you may want to be working on. Finance roles, again, there's equity, debt trade on public markets. There's a lot of these buying and selling of companies, but also just within the company, how do you value certain companies? Actually, Professor Yoon Lu is an expert, and she does a course. Actually, she has a course on valuing life sciences companies and all of that. Corporate finance, she teaches a course on corporate finance, how to prioritize and decide on internal investments. So that's something that she does. Sorry, guys, let me just make sure I'm keeping time in mind here. Okay, hold on. Regulatory, as I mentioned, all of the FDA stuff. So if your scientists came up with a new product or a new drug, obviously you have to go through intensive testing, multiple stages. First to, in cell culture, pre-lab, right? Lab testing, then in mice, primates, right? Then in humans, right? Then multiple stages of human testing, right? And then finally get approved. So all of those things are handled by regulatory professionals in conjunction with scientists and other aspects like finance people, business development, right? So because you have to communicate with all of these people, you already see how these roles can be interdisciplinary and collaborative, right? You need to know multiple aspects of the same in the same company, within the same company. Okay, so clinical trials are a big deal with regulatory professionals. All right, consulting. This is Professor Joel West's favorite area. If I don't mention this, he's not going to be happy with me. So I have to say this. So he's a super expert on consulting careers. He has multiple resources you can rely on. So if any of you have interest in this, to pursue this, again, what this is you are working as a consultant at a large or a small consulting company, but you deal with multiple different aspects. And again, please remember to attend Stephen Chang's talk coming up soon. It's on your schedule, and I'll be moderating the talk. But Stephen Chang, he's a great speaker. He's very organized, and he will give you very straight up, authentic information on what it takes to be a consultant. So it's not a walk in the park, sort of speak, right? I mean, there you still have to work just like any consulting job. You have to you're keeping in mind your client, and you may have to work a little bit long hours, but you get trained in multiple aspects of a company, right? So one moment you might be working on pricing of a drug. In another moment, you might be working on cultural aspects, merger between two companies. And so there may be multiple aspects of the same, of the same coin here. All right, Jay, you have a question? Yeah.
No, I just want to, sort of, add a little bit of color to what you're saying. I think that so for consulting, it is a very big industry. It have clients that's in different industry verticals, and so our students, when they go to consulting, they may or may not work in the life science type of industries. A lot of the firms that boutique, what we call boutique consulting firms, that only specialize in the life sciences, like Decibio, Prominent, and Syneos, right? Syneos, for example, came out of is Syneos Consulting is part of the parent company, which is a contract research manufacturing organization, and so that kind of consulting firms are very specialized into the life sciences, and so we have had many students that go into that kind of consulting firms. But we also occasionally have students that goes to KPMG, and we recently have someone I think went to Bain and Company, and so some of those consulting roles are more general, and so so just want you to have a understanding, have a sense that consulting can be very broad.
Yeah, and because it's very broad, it might be a good way to start off your career if you're willing to put in the hours and putting the work, all of that. It might help you to gain expertise, or at least gain exposure to multiple areas. Amy, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a quick question. So it says most leave consulting for industry position after 2 to 4 years. Like what kind of industry positions do they specifically go to? If you could list some examples.
So that might be a good question to ask Stephen. I don't remember exactly, but he did answer this question last year. I do remember this. So this question had come up last year, Amy, but I don't remember exactly what. But I don't know whether Jay knows additional. But definitely this happens because, again, remember, you're getting exposed to. So it's the perspective is different, right? So as a consultant, you're almost like an independent person. You're looking at the company aspects, and in some cases, companies come to you because of that reason. They want an independent set of eyes to look at the issue and give you the straight up answer, right? But as a consultant, you're not necessarily biased to answer the way the company wants you to, right? Because you're an independent consultant. You're giving them basically whatever the data says, right? Whereas when you go from consultant to company, like after 2 to 4 years, you're becoming part of the group, right? So that's you'll be still doing certain similar things, but there you'll be more within the group, and you might be subject to the organizational structure and all of that. Jay, if there's anything else to add.
Yeah. So a couple of points. There's a reaction on what Kumar was saying. Consultants, companies use consultants for different reasons, right? Sometimes it's because there's expertise inside the consulting firm that the company don't have, and sometimes those expertise is because that the company don't have is because it's ad hoc. For example, I'm a startup company. I don't have that market access expertise. I only have 1 or 2 products that I'm going to push through, and I'm not going to build expertise or market access. And so I hire a consultant to do that. Some larger companies, sometimes they hire consultants to provide an independent point of view. So for example, when I was working at ExxonMobil, coming out of my undergrad, when during our management training program, the director of chemicals for chemicals in Asia Pacific region explained to us how we ended up using, in this case, you have Essential, how we ended up using Essential for SAP, information system implementation. And at the time, they told us that actually Essential had free strategy consulting for ExxonMobil. But ExxonMobil, besides accepting that free consulting, went out to McKinsey to pay for a consulting that is just on IT strategy. And the reason is that they wanted an unbiased, objective perspective. And you're going to see this, for example, in the Purdue Pharma case, for those as in CBB1, is that Purdue Pharma actually hired McKinsey to provide consulting on the sales management process. How do you create incentives, and how do you do PR, explain those things? And some of those expertise that came from other industry, because they have people that consult across industry. And so one of the things is that if you want to go into consulting, one of the things that you want to ask yourself is that what kind of consultant that you want to be, right? And so in consulting, there's a lot of training, especially if you go to a kind of consulting firm like Deloitte, which is has an accounting arm. And so, some people go into the accounting or audit arm and then they cross over to the consulting. They tend to have training like conflict of interest and, all those things. And so consultants in some of the larger companies may have professional developing education that relates to conflict of interest and those things. And so that brings another kind of skill set that you have before you go into, the industry, right? And so, going for industry position, whether you are going to a small company or a large company, if you have in mind what kind of industry position that you want, that may influence the kind of consulting firms, the larger one, the smaller one, the boutique, the generalist that you may decide, yeah.
Thank you for that detailed information on consulting as well. All right, so I put Professor Joel West's photo here. As I mentioned to my other students earlier, that it's, please contact Professor Joel West if you need more information. Obviously, you can always contact me if there's a specific area, like let's say finance or or another area like HR/OB questions. I can answer, and Dr. J. Chalk is well versed in the business strategy area. So I'm sure, Jay, you worked with business development type topics as well. But definitely, we all can answer your questions if needed. So okay, so that's pretty much it from my side. But if you have any questions, I know it's a little early here, but Sharon?
Yes. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us today for the summer speaker series. I know a few of you had to hop off because of the time difference, so I do appreciate you that are here internationally as well as locally. If you have questions about our programs or any admissions questions, I put my email address in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to me with any program questions, or if you'd like a copy of this webinar as well.
All right, thank you so much, Sharon. All good, everybody, guys? Everybody?
Yeah, thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Kumar, for hosting. I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing all of you on campus soon.
Okay. All right, guys.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.